these are the bamboo shoots we planted last year.
They've grown so tall already.
You know the deal. Half now, half when it's done.
Just get it done. No mistakes.
You like this, huh? You're a strong boy. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, and I believe there's a way we can make this work for everyone.
The first light of morning crept softly through the curtains, spilling across the small wooden room like golden dust. Outside, the world was waking. The quiet murmur of water from the stream mixed with the distant crow of roosters, a melody of peace that only the countryside could hold. Diep stirred beneath the thin blanket, her body still heavy from the fever that had clung to her through the night. When she opened her eyes for a moment, she didn't know where she was. The air smelled of earth and rain, not the bitterness of the city. Then she saw the soft shadow near the door, the tall figure sitting in the chair, motionless, as if carved from stillness itself. James. He was asleep, head tilted forward, one arm resting across his chest. The faint morning light touched the edges of his face, softening the lines that the city had carved into him. His breathing was calm, deep, the kind of sleep that only comes after a night of worry. For a long moment, Diep just watched him. She couldn't remember the last time someone had stayed by her side out of genuine concern. It stirred something inside her, a fragile warmth she didn't dare name. The dog, Hockey, stirred at her feet, tail thumping softly against the floor. Diep smiled faintly. "Shh," she whispered, brushing her fingers through its fur. But the small sound was enough. James stirred, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her awake, a quiet relief crossed his face. "You're up," he said softly, his voice rough with fatigue. "How are you feeling?" She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness made her lean back against the pillow. "Better," she said. "I didn't expect you to stay." He gave a small smile, rubbing the back of his neck. "You had a fever. You scared me. I couldn't just leave you here alone." Her eyes softened. "You didn't have to." "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." There was silence for a moment, not the heavy kind, but something gentle, like the pause between two breaths. Outside, the sound of birds filled the air, and the morning sun began to spill into the room. James rose, stretching slightly. "I'll make breakfast," he said. "You need to eat something warm." "You don't have to do that either," she murmured, but he was already moving toward the small kitchen area. She watched as he moved, every motion deliberate, quiet, practiced. He wasn't the kind of man one expected to see in a humble wooden house, yet he seemed strangely at home here. The smell of rice porridge soon filled the room, mingling with the scent of wood smoke and morning dew. When he brought the bowl to her, Steam curled upward in soft white ribbons. "Careful," he said, handing her the spoon. "It's hot." Diep took a small bite. The warmth spread through her body, chasing away the last chill of fever. "It's good," she said, surprised. "You can cook." He smiled faintly. "I can follow instructions." The air between them softened. For the first time in a long while, Diep felt something she had forgotten: comfort. After they finished eating, James sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "You shouldn't work too hard," he said. "Your body's still weak. I saw the trellis you've been building for your garden. You're using too much bamboo. It'll exhaust you." She tilted her head, curious. "And what would you suggest, Mr. CEO?" He laughed quietly. "Use mesh cloth instead. It's lighter, easier to handle. I can help you cut some bamboo stakes later for support." Her heart tightened at his words. Not because of the suggestion, but because of the way he said it. He spoke as though her labor mattered, as though her small garden was something worth protecting. "I don't want to trouble you," she said. "You're not trouble," he replied simply. The simplicity of it made her chest ache. She looked down at the bowl in her hands, unable to meet his eyes. For so long, she had been treated like a burden, a problem to be fixed or ignored. And yet here he was, speaking as if her existence was something good. When she finally looked up, he was watching her, eyes calm, unreadable. "I'll head back later," he said quietly. "I have some contracts to finish today, but I'll come by tomorrow to help with the fence." "James," she began, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him she was grateful, that his presence had brought light back into her lonely days, but all she managed was, "Be careful on the road." He smiled, that soft, reassuring smile that never quite reached his eyes. Always, outside, the sun climbed higher, spreading warmth through the valley. The fields shimmered with new light, and the sound of Hockey barking at the chickens carried through the air. Diep watched as James gathered his things, his movements precise, yet unhurried. When he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway, looking back at her one last time. "Rest," he said. "That's an order." She laughed quietly, nodding. "Yes, sir." He hesitated, then said softer, "You're safe here now, Diep. Don't forget that." And then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the morning, leaving behind a silence that somehow felt less empty than before. The sound of his motorcycle faded into the distance, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the chatter of birds overhead. For a long while, Diep stood in the doorway, staring at the empty path that wound down the hill. The morning air was fresh and full of the scent of wet soil, and yet something inside her felt strangely hollow, as if the warmth he brought had gone with him. She looked around the small courtyard, the coop where the chickens pecked busily, the tiny patch of soil where she had planted the first rows of vegetables, the stream glinting at the edge of the property. Everything was alive, vibrant, and simple. It was the life she had chosen, away from the noise of the past. But sometimes, in the stillness, her thoughts became louder than she could bear. Hockey, her loyal dog, bounded toward her, tail wagging, tongue lolling out. She knelt to stroke his fur. "You're hungry too, aren't you?" she whispered. "All right, let's get breakfast for everyone." The routine grounded her. Scattering feed for the chickens, washing the feeding bowl for Hockey, gathering a few eggs from the coop. She worked in silence, the rhythm of small tasks soothing her heart. This was the kind of peace she had always dreamed of, but never believed she'd find. Still, her thoughts kept drifting back to James. The way his voice softened when he spoke, the faint tiredness behind his calm smile. He had stayed the entire night just because she'd had a fever. It wasn't just kindness, it was something deeper, something that made her chest tighten each time she remembered. When the chores were done, she picked up her machete and headed toward the grove of bamboo near the stream. The air there was cool and damp, filled with the whisper of wind through the leaves. She took a deep breath and began to work, cutting the thinner stalks first, her movements steady but slow. Each strike echoed in the quiet morning. "Mesh cloth," she murmured under her breath, remembering his advice. "Less bamboo, easier to build." She smiled faintly, Always thinking ahead, aren't you? The sun climbed higher, golden light breaking through the canopy. Sweat clung to her skin, her hands raw from the handle of the blade. But she didn't stop. She wanted to finish before noon to surprise him when he came back. By the time she returned to the house, her arms were trembling. She set the bamboo down beside the garden fence and wiped her forehead. The world shimmered faintly, a blur of green and gold. And then everything tilted. Her vision darkened. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on the bed inside. The faint hum of an engine reached her ears before she saw him. James, kneeling beside her, his hand on her wrist, checking her pulse. His expression was tight, controlled, but his eyes were filled with worry. "What happened?" she whispered. He let out a breath he'd been holding. "You fainted," he said. "I came back to drop off some documents and found you on the ground. Why didn't you rest like I told you?" "I just wanted to finish." "Finish what? Working yourself sick?" His voice was sharp for the first time, but it wasn't anger. It was fear. "You don't have to prove anything, Diep." She turned her head away, her throat dry. "I'm used to doing everything myself." He stood, running a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. "You don't have to be." Then softer, "Come on, you're burning up again. We're going to the doctor." "I'm fine," she protested weakly. "You're not," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. He helped her sit up, his hand steady on her shoulder. For a moment, their eyes met, hers filled with exhaustion, his with determination. Then, without another word, he scooped her gently into his arms. She tried to protest, but the warmth of his chest and the strength of his arms silenced her. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees as he carried her to the car. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Diep leaned against the window, her reflection pale and distant. James kept his focus on the road, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other resting near her knee as if to reassure her he was there. When they arrived, the small rural clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and flowers. A woman in a white coat, Dr. Tui, greeted them with a knowing smile. "You again, Mr. James. You bring more work than half the village." James gave a polite nod. "She's been sick, fever, sore throat, exhaustion." The doctor examined her gently, her voice calm and kind. "She's lucky you brought her in," she said. "A few days more of this, and her body would have given up." James's jaw tightened. "She's going to be all right?" "She just needs rest," Dr. Tui assured him. "I'll give her an IV and something for the fever." While the nurse set up the drip, James sat beside the bed, his gaze never leaving Diep's face. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over her, making her look fragile, almost translucent. She tried to smile. "You worry too much." He didn't answer immediately. "You scare me too easily," he said instead. For the first time, she saw the weight behind his calm, the sleepless nights, the constant responsibilities, the quiet loneliness that matched her own. The IV bag dripped steadily, a slow rhythm that filled the silence. Diep closed her eyes, her body relaxing as the medicine flowed through her veins. She felt the faint brush of his fingers as he adjusted the blanket over her. Careful, protective. "Rest," he murmured. "I'll handle everything else." When she woke again, hours had passed. The sun was already low, painting the windows with orange light. James was still there, sitting by her side, reading something on his phone. When he noticed her stir, he smiled faintly. "How do you feel?" "Better," she said softly. "You didn't have to wait." "I told you," he said. "I wanted to." The sun had almost disappeared behind the trees, leaving streaks of crimson across the sky. The air outside the clinic carried the faint scent of burning straw and evening dew. James helped Diep into the car slowly, careful not to let her stumble. She was weak, but her eyes held a quiet gratitude, a kind of softness that words could never quite express. They drove in silence. The road wound between golden fields and the soft shimmer of the river beyond. Occasionally, the wind carried the distant call of a heron. The world felt vast and still, as if holding its breath around them. James glanced at her from time to time. She looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. her fingers curled lightly in her lap. "You should have told me earlier that you weren't feeling well," he said at last. She gave a small laugh. "You already do too much for me, James. I didn't want to be a burden." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Taking care of you isn't a burden." The words hung in the air, warm and dangerous. Diep turned to him, searching his face, but he kept his eyes on the road. Something flickered between them, fleeting, fragile, but unmistakable. When they reached the town, he stopped at a small store near the market. "Wait here," he said, stepping out before she could argue. Through the window, she watched him speak to the shopkeeper, his posture straight and deliberate. He pointed at blankets, pillows, and other things she couldn't quite see. When he returned, his arms were full. "You didn't need to buy all that," she said. He smiled faintly. "You need warmth, not arguments." She shook her head but couldn't hide her smile. "You're impossible." He drove her back to the farm. The lights from the house glowed softly against the darkening sky. When they stepped inside, the air was cool and quiet, filled with the faint hum of crickets outside. James carried the bags to her bed, laying them down one by one. "I bought a few things," he said, pulling out a blanket wrapped in plastic. "This one's thick enough for winter." She ran her fingers over the fabric. "It's too expensive." "Then consider it borrowed," he replied. "You can pay me back when you're rich." She laughed, a soft sound that seemed to surprise even her. "You always know how to make me laugh, even when I don't want to." He looked at her, his expression gentle. "You should do it more often. It suits you." She froze for a moment, feeling her heartbeat quicken. The room seemed smaller, the space between them filled with something unspoken. He looked away first, clearing his throat. "I also bought a couple of towels," he added quickly, "for hockey. The nights are getting colder." Her lips parted in surprise. "You thought of him too? He's part of the family, isn't he?" Something in his voice made her chest ache. Family. The words sounded foreign and familiar all at once. Later, while James worked outside fixing the water pipe from the stream, Diep stood by the doorway, watching. The sky had turned indigo, the first stars blinking awake. His silhouette moved steadily in the dim light, every motion purposeful. The sound of running water mixed with the crackle of the small fire she had lit for cooking. When he finished, he walked back toward her, wiping sweat from his brow. "It should work fine now. Try turning the tap tomorrow morning." "You didn't have to do that yourself," she said softly. "I don't mind," he smiled. "Besides, I like being here." She lowered her gaze, her heart thudding unevenly. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" he asked gently. "Because they make me believe you mean more than you should." He paused, looking at her in the fading firelight. "Maybe I do," he said quietly. The words caught between them like a spark. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night around them was alive with the sound of insects, the whisper of wind through the bamboo. Then, almost as if nothing had happened, he said, "You should eat. I brought corn cobs from the neighbor's house. They'll make the chicken cook faster." She nodded, grateful for the shift. Together, they roasted the chicken over the fire, the smell of smoke and spice filling the air. The flames danced in their eyes, casting shifting shadows on the walls. As they ate, James spoke softly, his tone lighter now. "You know, life isn't always about fighting pain. Sometimes it's about learning when to rest." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like a philosopher tonight." He smiled. "Just a man who's seen too many people cry for the wrong reasons. Promise me something, Diep." "What?" "That your tears from now on, they'll only be for happiness." Her throat tightened. "That's a hard promise to make." "Then start with trying," he said. They fell into silence again, the kind that didn't need to be filled. After a while, she asked the question that had been burning inside her all evening. "James, do you care for me?" He looked up, startled. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a brief flash of uncertainty. He hesitated, then gave a faint, almost rueful smile. "Maybe I do. Maybe I care more than I should. But I don't know if what I feel is love or just wanting to protect you." She nodded slowly, her heart aching in a way she didn't fully understand. "That's enough," she whispered. "You don't have to say more." He didn't. Instead, he looked into the fire, his expression distant. After a moment, he said softly, "You're stronger than you think, Diep. You'll be fine on your own. Don't let the past hold you hostage." Later, when it was time for him to leave, he stood by the doorway looking back at her one last time. "Rest early," he said, "and don't work tomorrow. Let the morning be kind to you." "I will," she said. "Thank you for everything." He gave a small nod. "Take care, Diep, and forget what hurt you. The world can still be gentle." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the night. Inside the house, the fire crackled softly. Diep sat alone for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. The new blanket lay folded neatly beside her, the faint scent of new fabric clinging to it. Hockey rested his head on her lap, his eyes heavy with sleep. She reached out to stroke his fur. "Do you think he pities me?" she murmured. The dog gave no answer, only sighed deeply, as if understanding. She looked toward the window. Outside, the stars shone cold and clear, scattered like a promise across the black sky. Somewhere out there, James was driving back to his world, the world of glass towers and endless meetings, while she remained here, surrounded by earth, silence, and memory. And yet, as she closed her eyes, she felt something inside her shift. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was the quiet ache of someone learning to hope again. The night deepened, the crickets sang, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. Diep whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. "Maybe tomorrow will be better." The house listened. The stars above blinked in answer, and the world for once felt still and merciful.